All right, welcome everybody to the Departmental Showcase today on July 16th. Today we'll be highlighting the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. My name is Lee Casterton, and I'm very happy to be your moderator for the next hour. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm here on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. The Algonquin peoples have lived on this land since time immemorial, and I encourage you all to acknowledge the land that you are on as well. So we'll start by going over the instructions for today on the next slide. So all attendees, you'll notice that your microphones and cameras have been deactivated. The chat is also disabled for attendees, but we will use it to send resources. Please use the Q&A button to ask your questions. Please feel free to vote for questions you like by pressing the thumbs up. This session today will be given in English only. The French session will follow at 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock EST. All sessions are being recorded and will be available on the FYN RJFF YouTube channel in the 24 hours following this session. So shown here today is the agenda that we'll follow. So we'll start with the instructions that we just heard, followed by a welcome, and then presentation from the CNSC. So we'll go through each of the participants that will be providing a brief overview of themselves, their role, and some of the work that they do. Following that, we will provide, we'll have a questions and answer period where you will be able to use the Q&A function, as I mentioned, to upvote various questions. And next slide. So who is the CNSC? So the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. We regulate all nuclear facilities and activities in Canada under the Nuclear Safety Control Act. Our mandate is to ensure the protection of health, safety, security, and the environment in these regulated facilities and activities, as well as to implement Canada's international commitments on the peaceful use of nuclear energy. Our mandate also does include disseminating objective, scientific, technical, and regulatory information to the public. So my name is, we'll go to the next slide. So my name is Lee Casterton. I'm the Director of the Regulatory Framework Division at the CNSC. I began in 2008 full-time, but this does mean a lot to me as I began actually in 2005 as a summer student and attending events like this as well. I will now go through each of our panel members today to provide a brief bio of who they are and the work that they do with the CNSC. Tessa, please kick us off.
There we go. Sorry, the mute button wasn't working for me for a moment there. So hi, folks. My name is Tessa Henley, and I'm a policy officer with the Government Affairs team at the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission. I started in the organization as an analyst in the President's Office in November 2021, so I've been with the CNSC for 2.5 years now. In my current position, we provide key support to CNSC executives for their domestic engagements, provide leadership and support on parliamentary products and appearances, and help coordinate interdepartmental work. We also double as the Cabinet Affairs team, so we lead on any Treasury Board submissions, budget asks, memorandums to Cabinet, etc. I've actually got a lot of cool files on the go right now, but unfortunately I can only speak to a few of them given some of their sensitivities. So some cool work I've done more recently involves preparing CNSC staff for a parliamentary appearance at the Environment Committee in the House of Commons. This involved preparing questions that we would expect to get from politicians and running a dry run to help create an atmosphere that our executives could play within and get a feel for what it would really like to be there. So they were well prepared to go. Unfortunately, everything went off the rails, as most things do in Parliament, but it was still a lot of fun to work on. Another cool file that I got to contribute to in the last little while was putting together a briefing product on thermal networks. I actually worked with Matthew on this at one point. So this was a neat project because the concept of thermal networks is relatively new to Canada. It basically means district heating, but without going too far into the scientific weeds, which I can't go far into since I'm not a scientist, this was really neat because I got to flex my research muscles a little bit. And when you're doing a lot of executive support, I find that there's a lot of subject matters across the subject matter experts across the organization who I have to draw on. So I'm not usually the expert, but this was neat because I got to build up some knowledge on this topic. Other than this work, the other thing I want to highlight about myself is that I'm recently took on a co-chair position for the Pride Network at the CNSC. I'm very proud to be part of this network. I mean, not just because Pride is in our name. I'm actively a member of the 2S LGBTQIA plus community. Might have been a couple extra pluses in there, oopsies. But I identify as pansexual and my partner is asexual. So that's sort of where I fit in that spectrum. The Pride Network at the CNSC, we do a lot of neat things. We run Pride season events every year. So in the last 2 years, we've hosted a Two-Spirit speaker and a trans speaker. And this year we'll be hosting a drag queen story time. We run more social events for the folks who are located usually in Ottawa. And unfortunately, we are largely national cap NCR based, but for our members who aren't, we still do a lot of virtual stuff. So we, when it comes to social events, we leverage existing events. So the Federal Pride Network, which exists, that they run a lot of neat events that we like to show up for. CNSC events, when we have things in person, we create events on the side that people can go to afterwards. And we also leverage Capital Pride events naturally. The other things we like to do are try and push forward on an improvement in the organization. So a couple of ways we've done this is figured out how to have our pronouns shown in Teams, not in the same way that ISED does, but in a different way. So at least they're there. We helped eliminate the use of gendered titles in commission hearings. And another area where we added some value was to our travel process. So now there's a queer lens or LGBTQIA plus 2S plus considerations for when you're traveling abroad. So I think that was a lot about me. So I will hand it over to the next speaker.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Tessa. And Matthew, over to you.
Thanks, Lee, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm Matthew Narayan. I'm a project officer with the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission, CNSC Advanced Reactor Licensing Team. And I work on the regulation of new nuclear technologies, including small modular reactors. I'm also a YPN co-chair. I joined the CNSC in 2016 as a co-op student, and things kind of just progressed from there. So this type of forum is something that's very important to me. Big thanks to the FYN for having us, and welcome to everyone who joined us today to talk about nuclear safety and life at the CNSC. So what is advanced reactor licensing? This involves coordinating reviews by specialists of various aspects of a new license application and these advanced reactor technologies. So it means seeing the big picture to ensure the safety of that facility is secured for the life cycle from site preparation, construction, operation to decommissioning. I want to say I'm a project manager, but sometimes I feel more like a family doctor, being immersed in the day-to-day problem solving and incorporating different people's perspectives and information gathered from specialists to gain a more fulsome understanding of what is health and safety and how to make the most well-informed recommendations to protect Canadians. There's also an international collaboration angle to this, which is enabled by some of the agreements we have that are developed by our policy professionals to engage with international counterparts. In my case, the United States Regulatory Commission. We work together on a lot of these projects and learn from each other as many of the new technologies are being co-developed in Canada and the US. So networking is really a big part of my job. And what we're doing here with the YPN goes hand in hand with CNSC's mandate for ensuring health and safety of Canadians and the environment. Looking forward to our conversation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for being here today. And I will now pass it to Jessica, our last member of the panel.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jessica Beaudry. I am currently acting as a Senior International Relations Officer. My role supports various activities related to gender equity with an extra oomph on supporting women in STEM in the nuclear sector. In the last couple of years, I've been leading internal events like running a mentoring program at the CNSC. I also represent Canada in international working meetings. And another thing I do is support domestic activities related to building capacity in Canada. And one of the projects I wanted to mention today is the STEM workshop for Indigenous girls that I had the pleasure of planning back in May. It happened in Saskatchewan, and it was quite a big undertaking. We had over 40 Indigenous girls come to the University of Saskatchewan and participate in science labs, which were all hands-on. They were also assigned to amazing women mentors in STEM, so they were able to see women in STEM roles, as STEM leaders, and it was really, really awesome to see. There was also an Indigenous component to this. So the Indigenous elders, Indigenous chiefs, and Indigenous knowledge keepers were all part of it. And the logistics aspect was interesting. We flew in a dozen miners from northern Saskatchewan into the city. And overall, the participants got a taste of campus life. They told us that they would come back after graduating high school, and I think a lot of them left quite motivated. So that's a little part of what I do. And overall, I feel very lucky to have a job that I'm excited to talk about with my friends, my family, and I'm excited to talk about today. It's a job that is rewarding, it's a job that is challenging, and yeah, I really like it. So back to you, Lee.
Great, thank you, Jessica. And so nice to meet the three panel members, so thank you very much. Just before I go to the first Q&As here, I just want to mention, so although the four of us are located in Ottawa, we do have colleagues and employees from across Canada. We do have satellite offices, for instance, in Saskatoon, in Calgary, and Laval, as well as Mississauga, and we do have some site offices at nuclear facilities. And we do have employees as well from that in other cities across Canada. So we are broad ranging across the country, just to give you an idea of sort of where you may be situated and where you can look for when applying for jobs. So now I'll turn to the Q&As. So I'm going to batch a couple questions together. So Jessica, I'm going to start with you. And just to clarify, do we hire social science majors? And what advice could you give to anyone looking to work as a policy analyst or senior policy advisor with the commission in a non-STEM major?
Ooh, well, the answer is yes. That's the basic answer. We hire all sorts of people, various backgrounds, technical, social science. We've got finance folks. It is a bit like it's an organization that has all sorts of different jobs that require different qualifications and different skills. So one thing I would mention for someone who's interested in applying for a job is first, you want to sign up for career alerts. Right now, if you go onto the website, the CNSC jobs website, which we can link in the chat, I'll do that after. You'll notice there's a career alerts sign up page that you can click onto, add your email, and add in whatever roles you might be interested in, your educational background, that sort of stuff. And then you'll start getting passive notifications to your email. And that is really the best way to stay on top of the types of jobs that are available, the opportunities that you could apply for. And then, of course, once you apply, make sure to look at the KBCs, which are the key behavioral competencies. The key behavioral competencies are really embedded in everything that we do at the CNSC. We reflect on those, and we have conversations about those every year with our managers. So really make sure that those values connect with your values, and that you sort of do that before your interview and maybe speak to those competencies in your interview. The last thing I will mention is that the CNSC is part of the public service, but a separate employer. And we have a unique classification system. So what does that mean? That means that most of our workforce have reg level jobs. So if you're someone who is looking for that, I don't know, EG or ENG type of classification, well, that might be a reg 5 or a reg 6. We don't have AS2s, we don't have AS3s, we have reg 3s, which are just something to pay attention to. So don't look at that classification because we have a unique classification system.
All right, great. Thank you, Jessica. And as she mentioned, we will post our jobs page in the chat, so you'll be able to sign up for those notifications. Okay, going into the next question. So, Matthew, I'm going to ask you this one based on your bio here. So, what is the culture like at CNSC, and is it focused on driving Canadian innovation in nuclear energy?
Hey, thanks for the question. So yes, the culture at CNSC is highly innovative, and a lot of that comes from the diverse perspectives and educational backgrounds that folks are bringing to the table here. So, you know, engineers, scientists, finance, legal, policy, etc. And that all kind of factors into how we regulate new technologies. And as much as we are an independent regulator, arm's length from government and industry, we don't have a role with promoting technologies. A lot of the work we do in setting regulatory policy and frameworks, those are the enabling conditions for innovation. And this is something that is often highlighted on the international stage, that the CNSC's robust regulatory framework is seen as a competitive advantage. And in that regard, we are seeing a lot of proponents of advanced nuclear technologies, including fusion, starting their business in the Canadian jurisdiction. And that's a testament to the work that our organization does and the Canadian government as a whole to attract those new technologies and investments to our country.
All right, thank you very much, Matthew. So I'm going to go to one that I think we can go to everybody on. So what drew you to work at the CNSC, and what keeps you here? And Tessa, I'm going to start with you first.
Thanks, Lee. So I started my career in Ottawa through co-op positions offered in my master's program. So I did the Master's of Public Policy and Administration at Carleton. After a few different placements and other opportunities, I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for yet in terms of a career path, but I knew I wanted something a little different than what I'd already experienced. And for context, I had worked at Indigenous Services Canada, Global Affairs Canada, and at the Senate. At this time, I was working for a federal candidate looking to get elected in the 2021 federal election. He was a local candidate, he represented the NDP. So when I got offered when I got a job offer from the CNSC, I wasn't exactly jumping at it, as some folks might not be aware, but the NDP is typically anti-nuclear. So, and I was having a difficult time back then, sort of differentiating between nuclear industry versus the regulation of nuclear, which is inherently very different. We're an independent regulator. We're not a part of industry. We're not a part of government. We report together to the government, but that relationship is very distinct. So after doing a lot of this research, I kind of was able to rule out, okay, the nuclear part is not such a big deal, but I like to do something when I'm looking at a potential job offer, which I like to call reverse interviewing. So I went and did a bunch of research on the organization. I went and sought out folks from my network who had worked at the CNSC previously. And what I learned was actually really, really appealing. So I'd heard that they had gotten a new president recently. And between that and unfortunately a lot of what happened with the George Floyd protests, the CNSC had sort of driven forward in becoming this progressive contemporary organization. And that this was just like golden for me. So I jumped at the opportunity, and it turned out to be pretty much the best decision I've ever made. I've found a home. I really can't explain. The CNSC has been the best fit for me, beyond anything else I've done. At times, the work isn't necessarily the best match, but I find that your work environment is honestly sometimes more often more important than the work you're doing. So I work with fantastic colleagues who are brilliant, kind, professional, and honestly just really, really supportive. Some of my best mentors that I rely on to this day I've met at the CNSC. And I chalk this up a large part to CNSC's strong organizational culture, which is rooted in the people. So I won't go over our key behavioral competencies. I was going to touch on that in this answer, but you've already heard it from Jess. So beyond workplace dynamics, my favorite part of working for the CNSC is the timeliness of our work. So with nuclear power now classified as a type of clean energy, it's most likely that nuclear is going to play a massive role in reaching net zero. Momentum for nuclear is growing rapidly in Canada, with multiple provinces planning new nuclear projects, and even historically non-nuclear provinces like Nova Scotia undoing their legislative ban on nuclear this past spring. So things are coming along. So as Canada's nuclear regulator, we need to be able to keep pace with the nuclear developments to avoid being a barrier to progress and innovation, which means there's a lot of readiness work going on in our organization right now, and we're looking to grow so much as we're allowed effectively. So this is a very exciting place to be, and I'll cut it there.
Great, thank you so much, Tessa. And Jessica, if you can answer the same question as to what brought you and drew you to the CNSC, and what keeps you here.
Thanks, Lee. It's interesting listening to Tessa talking about the nuclear sector. I find the nuclear sector is one of these places where a lot of people just sort of end up in. It's not typically something that I don't hear that many people say in their, high school and post-secondary schooling, saying, I'm going to go in the nuclear sector, I'm going to go work at the CNSC, I'm going to go work for the nuclear regulator. Typically what I've seen is people sort of go into sciences, engineering, all sorts of different educational paths, and they sort of land here and then they stay here because the work is so interesting. The nuclear sector is something that I like, and I really find that it's so big of a sector and it's so detailed and so important to get right in terms of the safety and the security. And I just find it impacts everybody. So to me, that brings meaning, and that brings like a good feeling. So that's one of the reasons why I stay. I also really enjoy the fact that we are a separate employer. So we can be a little bit more agile, have a little bit of flexibility. We have more, when things need to move fast, they move fast. And that to me is something that I really appreciate. The size of the organization is perfect. It's big enough that you have all sorts of different projects going on, all sorts of different people you get to meet. But it's small enough that you can really get to know your managers, really get to know your colleagues. And it's, to me, it's a perfect size. Yeah. Thanks.
Great, thank you very much, Jessica. And Matthew, we have a lot of questions here, so I'm going to skip to another question for you, just so we can have a chance to try to get through as many as possible. So Matthew, if you could tell us a bit about what skills, experience, and/or competencies are most valued at the CNSC.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Lee. And yeah, we already talked a little bit about the key behavioral competencies and how that is factored into our approach to recruitment. But to elaborate on that a bit more, and as it relates to our work, I would say curiosity is one of the biggest indicators of someone who will succeed at CNSC, especially with, as Tessa and Jessica mentioned, it's an exciting time for this sector, and things are changing very quickly. So we need the type of people who are eager to learn and collaborate and keep up with this pace of change to stay at that cutting edge of technology and innovation, to build those capabilities so we can ensure safety in these as these new technologies are being deployed. And there's so many examples of this in society with artificial intelligence, for instance, is an analogy I often use, where governments are uh, trying to keep up with a change that is occurring. And we're very fortunate at the CNSC to be in a position where we're still ahead of the curve, and we're looking for more like-minded individuals, curious, enthusiastic people who will come on this journey with us to stay ahead of the curve and ensure safety of these technologies into the far future. Thanks.
All right, great. Thank you very much, Matthew. Now, Tessa, I wanted to ask you a bit about one of the upvoted questions here around what are the French and bilingual levels required for each of your positions, and how often do you speak French as part of your operational requirements? And Jessica, after you speak to this, I'll pass it, or sorry, Tessa, after you speak to it, I'll pass it over to Jessica as well, just so we can get a bit of difference between the two positions and how often you may use French.
So French. I personally have triple B French. I went out of my way to try and gain these levels. However, it was needed for my position in the president's office, though I moved jobs before I needed to level up. So now it's just kind of a nice to have. My job is English essential, and I'd say that a good portion of jobs at the CNSC are English essential, but that's not the case across the board. So I'll pass it over to Jessica to discuss how you might interact with French. We have a lot of francophones in the organization who do keep up their French, and so there's opportunities to continue using your French. You just have to seek them out, I'd say.
And just to expand on that, I think most, if not all, of our administrative assistant positions are bilingual. Most, if not all, of our management positions are bilingual. And that has to do with the Official Languages Act. There, we have a lot of licensees who are in Quebec. So there is a need for many positions at the CNSC to have a bilingual profile. Not all of them do. It really depends on the specificity of your role, your work, your team, where you're located, what you're going to be in charge of. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Jessica. And I know there was the question earlier on where our site offices are located. So we do have an office in Laval, where it is where we is primarily in French, dealing with the French hospitals as well, with all the medical isotopes and things like that. So okay, just going to the questions here. So Matthew, is there anything you recommend that someone gains experience in their current role as a student that could help make them more desirable candidate at the CNSC?
Sure. My top thing I'd say is would probably be storytelling, and that's really what we're doing here today. You know, having that sense of purpose and a well-informed pitch to you know, for your career is going to take you farther, right? Having an interest in the work you want to be involved in, where you want to go in the future, and reasons for doing it, I think is going to be the thing that, you know, brings the most success, right? A lot of this stuff is personal. You know, for myself, I grew up in Southern Ontario, a town called Ajax, between Pickering and Darlington, the two nuclear generating stations. So obviously safety was top of mind for my family, and that was something that kind of got me involved, interested, you know, started looking into how does nuclear reactor work, the waste, all of those things. And I'm sure there's something that motivates you all out there as well, and that's going to drive you towards your next career move. So think about it. reflect and keep telling your story.
Great, thank you very much, Matthew. And Tessa, how would you sell a career at the CNSC if you were talking to an external applicant?
I don't even know where to start. There's so many good things to highlight about the CNSC. So maybe I'll just kind of go through my experience to some degree and just kind of all the wonderful things I learned as I've become increasingly familiar and at home with the organization. So I think first and foremost is that this is a very professional organization. I've never been around such a elite uh, cadre of colleagues. I really can't even emphasize like how amazing it is to work with CNSC staff. I think alluding to something that Jen just mentioned earlier, people who don't tend to leave the CNSC, and I've personally seen that, and even people who do leave the CNSC tend to come back, and I think that really speaks to how well supported we are, how we well support each other, and the professionalism of everybody. Management is pretty consistent across the board and being very, very supportive and just good at their jobs, which it's it's fun to work with people who excel in their roles as well. So they set a high bar, and I think we are all striving to meet it. And we all like a challenge in this organization. I find there isn't too much complacency. So that's another lovely thing about the CNSC. I'm trying not to repeat what Jess said, because the size really is kind of beautiful. We're just under 1,000 people. So when I say the family, it does feel like a big CNSC family in a lot of ways. We had an in-person event this past June, and even though we all work in the virtual world a lot, when you're putting that face to this personality that you've gotten to know so well, it's really beautiful, and it's been a really wonderful experience. The CNSC is also a great place to grow, and we've got a lot of flexibility. So pretty much it kind of checks every box in the book, if you will. So I don't think there's much else to say. Please come to the CNSC, or at least consider it, because we're awesome, and we'd love to have you.
And just another plug to say, sign up for the notifications and make sure you get our career alerts so that you can join us. Jessica, so one of the popular questions here is there ever opportunities to be in a delegation internationally?
So it really depends on the job and the work that you do at the CNSC. I know some people are part of international delegations, especially for when there's the IAEA, which stands for International Atomic Energy Agency. There's some events that happen there. And let's say a safeguards event is happening, a conference of some sort, and we've got a couple specialists at this organization. Well, they can go present their work, their research. They can share best practices and how we do things, and share it with other regulators in the world. So there are some opportunities. They're not always open to everybody. So I don't want to make it sound like everyone's, got these international delegation opportunities, but there are definitely some divisions that it's a big part of their work. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Jessica. And Matthew, with your work on innovative technologies, which other departments or agencies do you work closely with?
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. And I guess it kind of builds on what Jessica mentioned as well about the international delegations. I mentioned before, CNSC has arrangements with not just other federal and provincial departments in Canada, but with the international community. So there's a bit of work with the United States Regulatory Commission, as I mentioned, a lot of cross-border aspects of some of these new technologies, like the small modular reactors. There's also the International Atomic Energy Agency under the United Nations, of which CNSC is a member of. More on the day-to-day, though, I'd say the work I do with new builds, it involves a lot of the environmental review agencies, such as Impact Assessment Agency, the ministries of environment in various provinces and territories where nuclear projects are being considered. So it's quite dynamic, you know, the policies and the shared responsibilities. We are an independent regulator, but we're not working in a silo. We're always tapping into the best information and expertise of people in Canada and all around the world in delivering our mandate, especially when it comes to these innovative technologies. You know, there is not one person who knows it all. We're a learning organization, and that's what is keeping us ahead of that curve to ensure safety and protect Canadians and the environment.
Okay, great. Thank you, Matthew. All right, I'm just gonna take a quick look here to see where we were at with the yup votes. All right. So, Jessica, I'm gonna ask you, do other government classifications cross over, for example, EC and PM, and can CNSC pull candidates from these pools?
Thanks for the question, Lee. So the short answer is that we have our own classification system. So it's not a direct, obvious thing. That said, if you are qualified in a pool and you apply to one of our positions, then you should write that in the cover letter, mention it for sure, because they may see it as something that is directly related or potentially partially related as something that you've partially qualified for or fully qualified for, depending on the pool that you're in, depending on the job. So mention it in your cover letter, and you'll find out, I guess, is the short answer. I also want to mention that we have 8 steps, I think, in most of our levels and for classification, and that is very different than other ones. I believe some positions have 6 steps, or classifications have 6 steps, and some classifications have 4 steps in the core government. So sometimes, like an AS2 and an AS3, they sort of park around Reg 3. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Hopefully that answers the question.
Great, thank you, Jessica. And for those interested too, when you do see job postings, there will be an HR contact. So if you have any questions about classification too, they'll be able to help you too, if you're looking from other pools. Tessa, our managers, you mentioned your BBB in French, so I want to ask you about training. So our managers very supportive in terms of letting their employees manage their own learning and volunteering, or are we limited by operational requirements?
So I'd say that our management is as lenient as they possibly can be. If there's a lot going on and we don't have any bandwidth or extra capacity to take on a learning initiative, well, then I think that you can the writing is there on the wall. We have to prioritize. But should there be time, space, and resources, 100%. They're most supportive. That how I got my triple B French was through French training taken at the CNSC. So obviously my manager was very much on board for me to do that. I'm actually looking to start back up on French again, and that was actually part of the negotiation. Was, well, you looks like you're about to have a bunch of work for the next 3 months, so maybe sequence it after that, which works for me because I want to ramp up to be able to try and test. Try and see where I fall within the C test placement or place within the C test. So that works for me because I can ramp up the training leading up towards end of next this fiscal. In terms of volunteering, you're talking to someone who got an award for volunteering in our organization, because I volunteered for pretty much everything that ever had a call out that I could possibly volunteer for. No one's ever had any qualms with that. In fact, it's been a point of pride for my management when they see my little face up there. They're like, "Oh, Tessa's on another one." So I naturally, I give my management, I try to let them know that I'm going to be volunteering for these things. But if you've got the space, then they're more than happy to see you grow, see you progress, and develop your career. So.
Thanks, Tessa, and congrats on the awards for volunteering. Well done. Matthew, over to you. If I can just ask, what is the receptiveness or culture around remote or hybrid working at the CNSC?
Thanks for the question. I'd say it's quite positive. It's one of those areas where everyone's experience is a little different, and CNSC management has been very supportive to the unique cases of staff, many of which we have working in the National Capital Region, in the head office, others at the regional offices, and some under telework agreements. And I'll just share an anecdote from my own experience, which you may relate to. I mentioned my family is in the Greater Toronto area by the power plant, so there are times where I'm working in the office here in Ottawa, other times at home, and I've been very fortunate to have work at the Darlington new nuclear site there in the Clarington region, and I travel for work, and when I go down to the site office to meet with inspectors or with the licensee, I'm staying with my family, and sometimes that work is a week, it could be a little longer, shorter. It's quite flexible, and having that best of both worlds of working in person and hybrid on site wherever we need to be, I think has been a great experience. And that just extends further into the international space. I talked a bit about how I work with my colleagues in the US and other parts of the world. We're not always traveling full delegation to Vienna. There are instances where we're leveraging technologies like these platforms on Zoom and Microsoft Teams to engage with other experts around the world. So I'd say it's a work in progress. We're still going through the growing pains of what is remote and hybrid work culture, but what we have at CNSC has been quite positive so far, and I look forward to what comes next.
Thanks, Matthew. And Jessica, if I just get your perception as well on the remote and hybrid, and also to add in another question, do we offer fully virtual positions as well?
Awesome. Thanks for the question, Lee. So the short answer is that we have a flexible work policy, and that it depends on the job, it depends on the role, it depends on what you're working on. So for those who work with secret documents, for example, they are going into the office to work on secret documents, can't bring those home. We have some people who have telework agreements and they live in BC or in New Brunswick. So there are some roles that allow for a working from home type of nature job. That said, if we're asked to come in, we come in. So most of my work I do from home. And when when I have work to do in the office, I go in. It's expected. And so far, the flexible work policy that we have has worked really well. And it's been, it's been quite positively received by employees. But like Matt mentioned, sometimes people travel for work. That's also a thing that that people at the CNSC have to do for inspections. For example, inspectors, they go to nuclear power plants and they do inspections. It's the same thing. If you're required to go into work, you go to work. So the location of our job is not employee driven, it's job driven.
Great. Thank you very much, Jessica. Now, I'm going to, there's a lot of questions on specific jobs and specific applications. So I will just repeat to go to the CNSC careers page that's linked in the chat. right now there's not too many postings, but if you sign up for the notifications, you will see those notifications. They'll be pushed to you as they come up. But just to give everybody sort of, I wanted to go around the table here with one of the questions about what advice would you give to a young professional looking to work with the CNSC? And how can we give those on the call today some advice? So, Tessa, I'll start with you.
Thanks, Lee. So I've given my advice a little bit. I hinted at it earlier, the reverse interviewing. I fully stand by it. You don't know what you're walking into. Not every environment's going to be a good fit. You never know. So do your research up front if you're looking for at a job posting, and go look up who's in charge there in GEDS. Try and find a senior or working level analyst. Get the perspectives of both. Try. I mean, if you can't get a hold of the manager, you might not be able to, but typically I think ground level staff have time and are usually more than open to sharing what their experiences are, particularly if it's a positive experience. So if you don't hear back, maybe that's a red flag. Otherwise, subscribe to our job alerts, and when you do go through the interview process, CNSC has resources on our site for going through interviews, making sure you're hitting all our key behavioral competencies. Just review all of that and set yourself up for success. So I'll pass it over to Jess.
Thanks. I sort of touched on this before, but I will suggest that people read about the nuclear sector, about what's going on in Canada, what's going on in their community, what's going on internationally. There is so much information about the nuclear sector that my friends and family have no idea on what's going on, because it's almost like, I don't know, it's if you look for it, you'll find it because it's there. And so my advice would be to be curious, and also follow people on LinkedIn, follow the Canadian Nuclear Safety Commission on LinkedIn. They have a page and they share all sorts of stuff. So you can just receive news about the organization very passively. And yeah, I think that would be it. Inform yourself, be curious, like what Matt was saying. Be curious and reach out to people. We're around. We can answer your questions. Thanks.
Yeah, I echo everything Jessica and Tessa have said, the importance of curiosity, enthusiasm, and reaching out. I think people are interested in helping people who are interested, right? So when you show that enthusiasm towards the work, you do your research and you come prepared to have, an engaging conversation, people are more likely to want to help you, and they may see an opportunity for you to help them. I often use this analogy. Jessica was talking about getting up to date and learning everything there is to learn about the nuclear sector. Is if you're a hockey fan, or maybe you like soccer, you have your favorite team, all the players, their backstories, what college or university they came from, the programs, the coaches, the ins and outs of everything. So when you find something you're interested in, something you love to do or would like to get involved in doing, whether that's nuclear safety or something else, bring that level of enthusiasm to what you're doing and how you research, and just love the game and get familiar with it.
Great, thank you, Matthew. So I'm going to ask Jessica, are there deployment opportunities available to CNSC for employees of other federal departments?
I don't know if there's any right now. I haven't seen any, but if there's something specific, who would they ask? Let me think about that one.
Okay, no problem. So Tessa, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what steps the CNSC is doing on the call to action for diversity and inclusion.
So, as I mentioned earlier, thanks for this question, Leigh. I really wanted to answer this one. So, since the call to action was made in 2021, the CNSC has changed drastically with respect to EDI. So, this you can see a little bit of it today, just us mentioning some of the employee networks that we're a part of. Pride Network emerged in 2021, Accessibility Network, all these EDI safe spaces. So that was some of what changed. That was sort of like a bottom-up change. There was also a top-down change, including equity, diversity, and inclusion as one of the CNSC's priorities in the last few years. Our former president, Velshi, was very big on women in STEM, so she drove a lot of this effort forward as well. It's actually a little hard for me because even though it's not necessarily my file, I'm actually deeply engaged in all of this. Like anytime we have an employment equity report, I'm contributing to it and so on and so forth from a network perspective. So there really is a lot going on at the organization from a talent management perspective as well as, and then you've also heard about our efforts when it comes to building up the next generation of the nuclear workforce and how we're applying an EDI lens to that with Jess's work. So obviously there is a lot going on. Cognizant that this is not, I don't want to call it an uphill battle, but sometimes there are people who may not understand the benefit of diversity and inclusion. I wanted to say this little poem that I've heard points taken from it before, but I think this really puts it all in perspective. And forgive me, I am just going to recite a poem to the entire group now. When a candle lights another, no light is lost, but rather it spreads to the corners once unseen, a glow where darkness once had been. So too with gender's equity's flame, it's not a zero-sum game. Each spark of fairness, big or small, brightens life and rights for all. For equity is not about loss, but sharing light across. And like the candle's steady glow, it helps humanity grow. So basically, what we can take away from all of that is effectively, in order for someone else to grow, we're not taking anything from anyone else. We're just broadening the pool. Like when we're talking about workforce development, we're broadening the talent pool. So I think I can just stop there. Or I ramble on about all our other wonderful EDI work.
Well, thank you very much, Tessa, and very well spoken. Maybe to Jessica, if I could ask you just a bit about the CNSC culture and our work with the GCWCC campaign. If you could speak to some of your involvement with that.
Sure, I'd love to. So a couple of things that I was involved with this year is the Dragon Boat Festival. So the CNSC had a team. Last year I was actually co-organizer of the Dragon Boat team. And it's just so much fun. It's a practice twice a week for the month before the Dragon Boat Festival that happens on Mooney's Bay in Ottawa. And there's about 25 of us who fit in a boat and just get a good workout on the water. The other thing that I went to this year was the golf tournament, and actually the headshot that I used for this this session is actually one that was taken at the golf tournament. I just asked Conrad. I was like, Conrad's someone who sometimes takes pictures at events. I was like, I need a headshot. Can you take a picture? And he just went click, and then he sent it to me. I was like, wow, this is so good. Thank you. So the golf tournament's awesome. We raised lots of money this year, and I'm not good at golf. I only play golf tournaments. I don't even think I have all the right golf clubs, but it was so much fun. Just being with colleagues and learning stuff through osmosis and through conversations in person. And I find it's really fascinating. Matthew, I think you've done quite a bit of things too. I'll pass it over to Matthew.
Sure, yeah. So my team's involved in that, both in my day job with licensing, and then also the Young Professionals Network, YPN, is trying to kind of expand its scope a little bit, both on the part of allyship and elevating the work that Tessa's team is doing with the Pride Network, Black Employees Network, and others, but also what we're bringing to the Government Canada Charitable Workplace Campaign. And one of the events we did recently, when we had some of our regional staff in town, was a YPN hockey tournament for the GCWCC. So that was a fun way to raise a bit of money and, get some friendly competition between staff and the organization. I'm personally not a hockey player, but it just showed the, diversity of interests we have in our groups. We're planning these events and we're looking at other things we can do to engage all kinds of our staff to grow the culture in the organization for collaboration side, but also the culture of giving and having that experience together, supporting a good cause like the GCWCC.
Great, thank you, Matthew. So I know we're running low on time here. We've got about 4 minutes. So I just to tackle a few of the questions in there that are on environmental assessment and biology. So we do have a directorate on environmental risk assessment that does look at radiation, environmental risk, environmental protection. There are no current job openings posted, but again, please sign up for a career page. Those job opportunities do come up, and we are always looking to hire. And again, to those looking from the non-technical area, we have many jobs in non-technical as well. So please do sign up and feel free to reach out to any of the 4 of us if you see something you're interested in and you want us to help you connect to people as well. So I'd like to just give everybody, all the panel members, sort of 1 minute to provide any sort of closing thoughts or any last minute advice you'd like to provide to the audience today. So Jessica, if it's okay, I'll start with you.
I think I've said everything. So thank you for having me on here. Thanks for letting me talk about myself and what I do here. It's been fun. Pass it over to Tessa.
Thanks, Jess. I'll echo the same thing, and I'll just steal from Matthew. Stay curious. So that'll definitely help you out if you're looking to get into the CNSC. So over to you, Matt.
Thanks, Tessa, and thanks everyone who tuned in today. There's a lot of good questions, and we didn't get to cover it all, but this is kind of what I'm hoping could be a start of a relationship between our respective organizations and networks. So, keeping with the theme, please reach out to any of us. You have our LinkedIn's and our bios. The job posting page is available for you, and that should be plenty to get the ball rolling. Stay curious, and I hope you all have a great summer. We look forward to hearing from you.
Well, thank you to the esteemed panel members, and thank you to all those who have attended today. I really appreciate you taking the time to learn a bit about the CNSC, and we hope you found this very helpful. The Federal Youth Network will be sending out a questionnaire after this as well, so please feel free to respond that. Here's the feedback form. Actually, it just popped up, so please take your time to provide your feedback so that we can constantly improve as well. And again, thank you all, and please don't hesitate to reach out to any of us if you have any questions about the CNSC. Take care.